Hi guys, and welcome back to part 2. So now it's time to get a little bit more specific about these different transformations you guys have learned about. So the first one again is going to be translation, and you can see that it can be written two different ways. So one of them is the algebraic form like this. It shows you xy is going to be mapped to, that's a little arrow, x plus h, y plus k. So h is going to describe how it changed in the x direction, and y is going to represent how it changed in the y direction. So the positive direction for x would be to the right, and the negative direction is to the left. The positive direction for y is up, and the negative direction for that is going to be down. There's also a shortcut way to write this, which is to just write the h and the k part with these pointy looking brackets. But let's start off with the algebraic form. So number 1 says write the translation that maps triangle A to A prime in both forms. So here is A and here is A prime. Remember, A is the before and A prime is the after. So if I look at what's happening in the x direction, I started off here and then I moved to the right. So before the x was at -4, and now the x is at +2. So that means it's moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right, and then down 3. So it just in regular English terms, what's happened is it's moved to the right 6 and down 3. So what I can say is every single point in this triangle has been translated to the right 6. So again, that's the positive x direction. And down 3, that's the negative y direction. So I write it like this. xy, so every point, xy, has been mapped to a new point, x plus 6. So whatever your x was before, it's now 6 more than that. And y minus 3. So whatever your y was before, now it's going to be 3 less than that. So for instance, the point here was at -4, +7, and now it is at +2, +4. So the x has increased by 6 and the y has decreased by 3. If I wanted to write it in component form or vector form, depending on where you learn it, you can just write the 6 and the -3 like this. Number 2, translate the point B, which is at 6, 7, using the vector 0, -8. Find B prime. So this is the before, the B, and it's telling me find the after. And it's telling me how it's going to change. So my x before was 6, and the 0 means it's not going to change at all. So my x after is also going to be 6. My y coordinate before was 7, and -8 means it's going to decrease by 8. So B prime, the 6 isn't actually going to change at all. And then the 7, my y coordinate, is going to decrease by 8, which means my new point B prime should be at 6, -1. And finally, there's one more thing I might ask you, which is a question like number 3. It says using the transformation, so this is the transformation where xy gets mapped to x plus 8, y minus 2. Find the point that would lead to C prime, which is at 3, -1. So this is giving me the after, and it's asking me what's the before. Well, the before, x got increased by 8, and then I ended up at 3. So if I want to go backwards, then my after, if I decrease it by 8, I should end up back at the original. Same thing with my y. What happened with the original y is it got decreased by 2, and it ended up at -1. So to go back to the original, I start at -1, I increase it by 2, and I'm going to end up back at my original, and that's how I figured that out. So my original point must have been at -5, 1. And then this x got increased by 8, which ended me up at 3. And my y coordinate 1 got decreased by 2, which is how I ended up at -1. All right, our next one is reflections. So for this example, it says draw the reflection of triangle ABC when it's reflected across the x-axis. Okay, so first of all, this right here, this is my x-axis. And you can kind of think of it as a fold line. So when it's done, all parts of that triangle should be on this side, should be in the negative part of that. This is easier to do if you just do one point at a time. So for instance, it might be easy to start with point C. So point C is here. Here's the x-axis. Point C is going to get mapped to C prime, which is here. And A is going to get mapped to A prime, which is down here. And B is going to get mapped to B prime, which is over here. After I get each point individually, then I'm going to go ahead and draw on the lines. So when you're actually doing this, I would start by doing one point at a time, and then when you're done, try to connect the lines. I never try to reflect an entire figure at a time or even an entire line segment at a time. I always do one point at a time. So I can go ahead and figure out where my new points are. So A prime and B prime and C prime are at these new coordinates. Now there's a question here. It says, is triangle A prime, B prime, C prime congruent to triangle ABC? And yes, it is. It's an isometry. The before and the after should be congruent. Okay, rotation. So this is some notation you guys haven't seen before, but there's a scripty looking R, and then it says O, and then it has some number of degrees, either positive or negative. This is basically telling you that the center of rotation is going to be this point O here. So all the rotations are going to be around this point. Now if you guys remember, if I went all the way around a point, I would end up with 360 degrees. So each of these angles here actually measure 60 degrees. Now the first one says I'm going to do a rotation around the center of rotation O, positive 60 degrees. So I'm going to start at E, and then if I go positive 60 degrees, that means I'm going counterclockwise. So I'm going in this direction, 60 degrees around O, and I'm going to end up at F. So that's the rotation of that. Now it says I'm going to start at F, I'm going to go around O, negative 120 degrees. So now if I start here at F and I go clockwise, here's 60 degrees, here's 120 degrees. So I would end up at D. So that's going to be my image. F was my pre-image and D is my image. Last one, and this is an entire line segment, so I'm going to do one point at a time. I'm going to rotate 180 degrees around the center of rotation O. So point B is here. If I move 180 degrees around the center, so counterclockwise, 180 degrees, I'm going to end up at E. And if I have the point A and I rotate 180 degrees around, I'm going to end up at D. So B gets mapped to E and A gets mapped to D, so the line segment BA is going to get mapped to line segment ED. Okay. Finally, dilations. Dilations, usually the only thing that's difficult is figuring out the scale factor. The scale factor, the way it works, it's always the after over the before. So it's the after P prime over the before, which is P. So be careful, because in this picture I've deliberately given you one that you have to think a little bit more about. So when I think about this, the scale factor is going to be the P distance to the P prime over distance to the P. So here's the center of dilation. The scale factor is going to be the distance to the P prime over distance to the P. So from here to P prime, that's going to be 7 plus 15, so that's 22, over the distance from C to P, which is going to be 7. So for this one, the scale factor K is going to be the distance to P prime over the distance to P, which is the distance between C and P prime over the distance between C and P. So it's going to be 22 over 7, which is actually a number a little bit more than 3. But in this case, all I really care about right now is that if it's an enlargement or a reduction. And again, to tell if it's an enlargement or a reduction, I'm going to see if this number is bigger than 0 or less than 0. In this case, it's bigger than 1 or less than 1. And in this case, it's bigger than 1. I mean, 22 over 7 is going to be 3 and a little bit more than that. So this is going to be an enlargement. That means that the after is bigger than the before was. All right. There's 4 more questions on this page. Go ahead and pause the video and do your best and check your answers when you get back. Hopefully you've already completed these questions. I'm going to go ahead and show you these answers. So number 1, the only one that makes sense here is going to be answer B. So that's going to be the only one that has a scale factor of 3 to 4 or 4 to 3. In this case, I didn't tell you which one was the before and which one was the after, but this is the only one that it actually makes sense. And if it's 3 to 4, it's going to be the smaller number over the bigger number. In this case, it's 9 to 12, which reduces to 3 to 4. Example 2, it says the pre-image of triangle ABC has these vertices and the image of ABC has these vertices. Remember the first one, the pre-image, that's the before, and the A prime, B prime, C prime, that's the after. So this was the pre-image and this is the image. It looks like this triangle is being rotated about the origin. So the center of rotation is the origin, and it's been rotated 90 degrees in the positive or negative direction. Good, that's the negative direction. So it's going clockwise, so that's actually going to be a negative one. It's actually going to be a negative 90-degree rotation in this case. Number 3, what are the most likely coordinates of r prime if line segment r prime s prime is a reflection of line segment rs across the y-axis? Hopefully you guys did what I said and you reflected one at a time. So where does r end up and where does s end up? S ends up right there at 1, 2, and r should get reflected over here. So hopefully you guys were able to do that correctly. So S got reflected here, R got reflected here. This is line segment R prime S prime, and R prime ended up at 4 and 4, 3. So the correct answer here is A. Last one. This one might be the trickiest one. Number 4. It says, in relation to one figure, the other figure is apparently a blank. So is this a reflection or a rotation? Hopefully you guys were able to see that the orientation of it is a rotation. It says there's 2 possible ones for this, a 90-degree rotation or a 180-degree rotation. I think you can see if this is the origin, it ended up exactly on the other side of it, which means the best answer here is going to be a 180-degree rotation about the origin, which is D, is the best answer. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys your exit ticket now.